Now what we're going to do is move into chapter 10, where we're going to be looking at geometry. So I'll say very little of what we see in this chapter should be brand new to you. We're going to be going over a lot of stuff that you likely will have some experience with. You may remember, you may not, from middle and high school geometry, depending on exactly when you took it, with a few other things that might be less familiar, but for the most part, everything we see in here will be things you've done, especially if you've taken a course in pre-calculus already. But first thing we're going to look at is the basic set of building blocks for geometry: points, lines, and planes. So again, we'll start with some pretty straightforward, basic stuff, lots of definitions in this section. Here, a point, we just take that as a dot that represents a location. It is a place in space. It is a single fixed point, as it were, where it has no dimension to itself. We can think of the point as being zero-dimensional. It doesn't have width or depth or height. It is just a point. Next, if we want to talk about adding more detail, adding more possibilities, more things we can do, we can connect our points by looking at lines, where for a line, what we're looking at is the shortest path between points. I should probably move this guy down here, just for a little bit more space. So we're talking about our shortest potential path that we can have between 2 points. Let's say we've got one guy like this, and then one guy out here, 2 points. We can draw a line that represents the shortest distance that we can get from one point to the other. So we can think of lines as being one-dimensional objects, where for our lines, at least in this general construction, we have that they only have this infinite length that goes on in either direction, and no real width or depth. It's just the single dimension. From these ideas of lines, we have a few minor, I'll call them sub-constructions, things called half-lines, as well as rays and line segments, where rather than writing out a definition for these, the easiest thing to do really is to just draw a picture of each. And that's the nice thing about this geometric stuff is a lot of times, the definitions make them sound a little bit more intense, a little bit more exacting than they are. They're pretty straightforward though. So when we're looking at a half line, what we are looking at is something where we take one point, but we don't include it. So that's what that open circle means, is we're taking the point but not actually including it there. Then we have some other point that we actually do include, and then we let our line go on forever. So we just get half of a line in a sense, because we only have infinite extension in one direction. Then we can get our rays by taking that same sort of starting piece and filling it in. And then we go on and on, where we hit some other point along the way. So difference between a half line and an array is whether or not we include the point that we start with. And then our last piece is the line segment, where it starts in the same sort of way as array. You got a dot, then you go to that other dot, and you stop. So those are just portions of lines that exist strictly between 2 points. All they are is that shortest path that we talked about being in the definition of what a line is. And then finally we have our last one, our last big piece, which are planes. where planes are really just flat surfaces. So when we're talking about a plane, what we're looking at is taking basically any combination of these two, flattening it out, and looking at what all can possibly happen up there. So for a way that we can connect all of these sort of things together, think about looking at a map, a flattened out map, not like a globe. And let's say you want to identify a particular point on the map. Say you want to look at FGCU. That's a location that has some meaning to some of you, I suppose. And then let's say you want to look at that, and from there talk about going from FGCU to Miami for whatever reason. So we can talk about the points, FGCU and Miami. They're just locations on the map. They don't have any greater meaning. Then we can talk about the line between them, the path that takes us from FGCU to Miami, the most direct path anyway, suppose that'd be as a crow flies on the map. And then the plane is the entire region on the map, the entire space that is represented by the map. So you can think of these things as sort of being a natural progression from one into the next, where we give ourselves more dimension, more possibilities, and more information to look at.